I thought for this audience, and given that gaming is somewhat new to BBC Worldwide as well, I'd give a little bit of an overview. So for any of you that don't know, BBC Worldwide, we're the commercial arm of the BBC, 21 offices worldwide. We're primarily a sales and distribution operation, but recently we've been, over the last few years, growing the amount of content we're building ourselves. So obviously our primary role is taking the BBC's IP and commercializing it, but with our LA office as a script generation content team that are building such things as Torchwood, which aired on Stars and BBC last year. With the investment we have in various TV productions and groups around the world, and working with partnerships with other broadcasters, BBC Worldwide is now investing a lot in content production. And that leads to why I'm here as well, which is a couple of years ago we founded a group to actually sort of really build gaming out from our traditional point of licensed position, where we were telling everyone how brilliant our IP was and how much they needed to pay for it, to actually turning around and saying, okay, well, we're going to start putting some of our own money in this. So we started off with what many would consider the easy wins, which is we went into iOS and Android gaming and released a number of titles over the last few years. Some of those up there have been very successful. Some of us, the Weakest Link Royal Wedding Edition wasn't quite as successful as we'd hoped. I think actually the problem was we didn't have Anne Robinson. I think if we had have done that, would have done much better, but there we go. And then moving on from that, we spent the last year or so investing in bringing some of our really big brands to gaming experiences. So we have such things as Doctor Who Worlds in Time, which is our casual MMO online. Strictly Keep Dancing launched last week, which again, another casual MMO. Top Gear Stunt School Revolution is launching soon, which is our first entry into freemium. So you can see using our really, really big brands, but as well as things and slightly interesting left field propositions, such as Jane Austen's Rogues and Romance, which is one of our first forays into Facebook gaming. So looking at how we can take the perception of the BBC from the worldwide audience and actually deliver content to audiences, because in America, behind news, the #1 thing everyone thinks the BBC produces is actually Downton Abbey. Now, apart from that being a real claw in the throat for the ITV people, it just gives you that insight into the foreign audiences seeing the real Britishness of the BBC and how we can do it. So we're doing it by creating Facebook games that allow you to explore the world of Jane Austen. So enough on the sales pitch, and I'd like to move on to just some thoughts on, as Martin's just sort of mentioned, and he brought up a graph with actual data, where I just went with a picture. TV viewing's increasing, which is a positive thing for the industry, but first-time live TXing is probably reducing. We know about the shift to time-shifted viewing is driving a huge amount of figures. And then the markets for video on demand and download to own. I mean, you think about how 3 years ago nobody had ever heard of Netflix. It was just the UK version, so it was just the US version of Love Film or Blockbuster, and what was that? It was just DVD rental, and now suddenly they're the #1 paid broadcaster in the US at the moment. YouTube, 5 years ago, who would have thought that YouTube would start delivering a channels strategy, where they're now funding with some very, very big money, actually producing their own content. It's shifting really, really quickly. A recent Nielsen survey puts up that basically 86% of respondents said that they use a second screen while they're watching television. 42% of those daily used a tablet. 40% of them daily used a smartphone while they're watching television. So there's this really big market that's engaging with second screen. And what's really interesting is it seems to break down into 3 parts. You've got the viewing audience. You've got the traditional or normal viewer who's just watching television, hasn't bought an iPad yet, maybe. There's 4 or 5 of them, I understand, in the US. Then you've got the non-engaged, which is 60% of respondents said that they were checking email while they were watching TV. 46% were surfing, 42% were engaging with social networking, 29% were actually engaging with content related to the TV show they were watching. So then that's the second thing obviously being the non-engaged people. The third thing being, okay, so 30% of the people who are engaging in second screen were actually using it to enhance their TV viewing. So that feels like a really exciting opportunity. So how can we get to those people? How can we convert, the normal viewers and also the non-engaged viewers into people who are actually going to engage us? And right now the market's going in a couple of areas. There's what I term as the horizontal apps. So you've got the platforms looking to catch on the social trail that Facebook and Twitter obviously drive. We know that massive TV events are driving massive social engagement. 20,000 tweets per minute during the Oscars 2012. I mean, that's a huge amount of engagement from an audience. And so these people like Miso and Zbox are providing platforms to engage, to aggregate TV-related content and to engage people. And I think from our point of view right now, we're really interested. We're doing some work with these people about how we can partner and deliver our aggregated content to them. How can we use them as platforms? I think the interesting question has to be is, are they just a breeder program for the 900-pound gorilla in the room, which is Facebook? Where are social networking? Where is social networking going? Is anyone going to actually go and challenge them, or are these just going to get swallowed up? But all the time people are delivering these platforms, then it makes great sense for us to think about how we use them. Then you've got the vertical apps. Martin talked a little bit about £1 Million Drop, one of the most successful in the industry right now. There's things like the Red versus Black, X Factor. A lot of the reality TV and sort of competition reality TV shows are using these vertical propositions where they give you a call to action, you engage in the show. But it seems to be centered very much around directed monetization. So it's either about engaging the consumer with a reward at the end, or it's about driving advertising. I think a certain pizza chain had a very successful go with Red versus Black and drive some really, really good figures on that. But the question I sort of want to answer is, has anyone actually asked or thought about what the audience wanted? If the motivation and a lot of the funding right now for second screen apps is coming from it's coming from two simple places. The first is advertising, which is great. There's a lot of advertising people in the room. And we at BBC Worldwide would love to know how we can engage with you more to fund some of our projects. And then the second thing seems to be just data acquisition. It's all about how you can get more and more emails into your CRM bases. And what I'm thinking, coming from a gaming background, is that where we should be stopping? Should we not be looking at doing what we do so well, which is providing brilliant content, whether it's coming from a TV side, whether it's coming from a gaming side, and actually using that to enhance the viewer's experience, to take the viewers on a journey. This is why people watch TV. This is why people play games. Games are all about going into alternate realities, living out your fantasies. A lot of TV is about that. I mean, I personally love the engagement around a show that delivers me an incredible backstory. Can we deepen that experience with second screen apps? Can we actually push the envelope and actually do something? Could we have content that leads to play during the downtime after the show? When you finished watching it on your time-shifted viewing, when you finished watching it because you've just downloaded as a VTO, where can we take the consumer with that? Which leads me as well next to some thoughts about transmedia, because then this week we're getting into, right, okay, we're taking the consumer from one device and into a second or a third or a fourth or anything like that. There's a great quote I was given when I was preparing for this by a colleague from Henry Jenkins, who's the Professor of Communications, Journalism, Cinematic Arts and Education in Southern California, and he defines transmedia as: transmedia represents a strategy for telling stories where there's a particularly diverse set of characters, where the world is richly realized, and whereas there is a strong backstory or mythology that can extend beyond the specific episodes being depicted in the film or television series. That's most of our narrative content, is it not? It's definitely what I build games to try and do, and I know, from working with TV producers and talking to them as I've been working with BBC Worldwide, that's what they want to do. So it sounds like that's perfect. But having looked at most of the transmedia experiences out there, I had to ask the question, is transmedia transmediocre at the moment? It seems to... Hey, I got my laugh, thank you. The word itself seems to suggest that basically all you're doing is taking the same content and pushing it out to multiple devices. And I think it needs to be more than that. I think the challenge for us as content producers needs to be about how we expand the experience into different devices. My personal goal when I started making games was about making things that were so addictive that people never stopped playing them. Thankfully, it was 20 years ago, and that was my life. I wanted to do that all the time. Now I've sort of realized that maybe we don't want to engage people quite so much. But how about an experience which moves from device to device? Something where they sit down in front of the television and go through the viewing experience. And then they move on to the mobile, they move on to their tablet, they move on to their game, they move into traditional media such as print, and then emerging technologies allowing us to go in all sorts of different directions. Some of the experiments that are being done around really supplementing the viewing experience with something that you cannot get apart from using a second screen is really, really cool. And that you look to try and pull all this together into a coherent whole. So right now, where we're thinking of investing our money around transmedia is trying to pull these three things together. This is something we're doing right now. We've got some experiments underway, which unfortunately they're a little too early to sort of really talk about. Hopefully, if you found this at all interesting, I'll come back next year and tell you whether they were any good or not. But we're looking at how we can take the high-quality TV narrative content, working with, right now we're working with a BAFTA award-winning TV production company to produce the content that matches up with what people expect from TV, but just on different platforms. How we can then interweave that into real gaming, into the gaming experiences that we know consumers engage with because they feel that takes them deeper into a world than they normally get into than a passive experience, allows them to really interact and actually create their own experiences. And then pulling that into multiple platforms. So how does it start on television, move onto the web, then go onto mobile and tablet, and even then go as far as console gaming as well? And that these are all connected, so as the consumer moves between all of these different devices, they take that experience with them. Every single one is additive. So in many ways, when I describe that, we're back to that circle about we're back to the start of a circular experience where the consumer is engaging with a narrative, a show, a franchise all the time just through their different devices. That's my vision. That's where we want to put our money. That's where we really want to see us pushing that envelope. And so I think the open challenge is, if you think that this is something you'd like to share, please come and talk to us. Thank you very much.